You and your partner both escalate and say things that you didn't fully mean, or you said things that you meant, but they came out harsher than you really wanted them to be. And then afterwards, it feels like you've not only crossed a certain threshold, but you also depleted the relationship of so many good things because you and your partner have this habit of going over a certain threshold and you want to know what to do. This video is for couples who want to stop going into this pattern and cycle with each other. Couples who want to talk about hard things without falling into escalation or avoidance. That double-edged sword where either we avoid or we lean in and fight. There's another option, this trap that you only have two options of either avoid it or blow it up. Neither one is going to work, and both of them are detrimental to your relationship. So let me say this clearly. You don't have a communication problem. You have an escalation problem, a biological problem that you're trying to solve through more communication. 'Cause after all, when darkness falls, what do we have except you and me? Here's what most people miss when they're talking about conflict. You cannot resolve what your body cannot process. When couples escalate, they think, we need to communicate better. We need to get better at talking. We need to talk more. So they try talking more. They try changing their way of approaching more talking, and they try to push through or explain the issue more. But these options, they don't work for a particular reason. And it's because the problem isn't just a communication problem. In fact, it's something more damaging and important to look at. It's a state problem. When you or your partner are escalated, your heart rate spike, cortisol rises, adrenaline floods your nervous system. These are the stress hormones that tell your body there is danger, there is a fight, there is an urgency. The prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, if you will, it goes offline. So when couples escalate, this is what researchers like Dr. John Gottman call the diffuse physiological arousal, or DPA for short, problem. And it's a state where your body is flooded. Your heart rate and cortisol rise and adrenaline kicks in. In simple terms, this is fight or flight. And once you're in this state, it's like your system is overwhelmed. When you're in DPA for short, your body is flooded and overwhelmed, so your ability to empathize or to stay grounded, it drops dramatically because your nervous system is taking over, and the prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that operates the logic and empathy, it's no longer there. So you're not having a conversation with your partner, you're having a conversation with the stress hormones in your partner. And this is the moment that most couples miss, and it's the moment that most couples need to learn how to understand differently, because if they keep talking from this place, they don't resolve things, they actually make things worse. Taking a break is how you interrupt that diffuse physiological arousal, or that fight or flight, before it damages the relationship, before you and your partner say things or become the kinds of people that hurt each other. When you're in this fight or flight state, your ability to be attuned, to be grounded, to be empathetic, to be logical, it goes away. So trying to resolve conflict in this state is like performing surgery in the dark. This is why it's so important that couples learn how to take a break, which is something I'm going to teach you today about how couples can take breaks and how they can have a biological reset so that when they do talk, they're repatterning the relationship so conversations are safe and connection is healthy. So to start, it's really important that we start by learning how to spot the moments when you and your partner are flooded and when you and your partner really should be taking breaks, because most couples resist these breaks, or they do it in the kind of way that makes them feel abandoned or avoided. And couples don't usually just explode out of nowhere. There's actually a moment before escalation that, in my 20 years of working with couples, I can usually spot. There's this threshold that changes people. You hear something that you don't like, or something feels off or unfair, or you feel attacked, and then your breath changes, or your posture changes, or there's a certain kind of shift that occurs in the room, and then all of a sudden there's this urgency of we need to talk about this, we need to get through this, or we don't want to talk, I can't talk, there's a fight. And then both of you are in this flooded state, and it's inside this state that both of you lose each other. And then, just like that, you two are no longer grounded or present with one another. Instead, you're activated. Your voices change, your postures change. You two are no longer inside a communication issue, you're inside a biological problem, or outside of this window that we call the window of tolerance, this special window where we can tolerate one another, where we can be patient, where we can be present. And once couples go outside this window, whether they get escalated and get louder or they shut down and get more quiet and more avoidant, when they're outside this window, whether above or below, they're no longer able to stay present with one another. And let me say this clearly. Communication will not save your relationship if you don't know how to manage this window of tolerance. Learning how to manage the escalation in your relationship requires a different move, and it's not a move of let's get better at talking or communicating. Instead, let's look at some data and research. Decades of work by Dr. John Gottman and Dr. Robert Levinson show something really interesting and something that most couples have never been taught. When you two are inside of conflict, you're actually biologically linked with each other. When your partner's heart rate rises, when your partner's voice and tone changes, your physiology follows. So when one of you gets flooded, both of you will get flooded. When your partner's system reacts, your system will follow shortly thereafter. So you two are not just arguing, you're escalating and reacting to each other, and therefore you two are actually wired together. Your nervous systems are interacting in real time with each other. And this is really important to look at when we're talking about conflict. You two are mirroring and amplifying each other. Or in Dr. Levinson's work, he calls this the autonomic linkage between couples. And as Dr. Stan Tatkin explains in his book, Wired Together, couples share a nervous system and they share a psychological wiring together. What one of you does affects the other, and that shapes the relationship itself. Which means you two are not two separate beings completely or two separate systems inside of a conflict. You are actually one shared system under stress. And this is where everything changes if you're willing to follow along with this idea or fact, in my opinion, because now the goal isn't just to win the argument or get better at communication. The goal is to protect the relationship from these moments of escalation. The relationship can become this third entity, something that both of you are responsible for taking care of. And that means escalation beyond a certain threshold damages the system, damages the relationship. It doesn't just hurt you, it doesn't just hurt your partner, it hurts both of you. It takes you both out of the very state that you both need to actually even resolve anything. But most couples don't see it that way. Most people think, we just need to push through, or we need to avoid the issue altogether, or my partner's being dramatic and we just don't need to talk about these things. And the other issue is that most couples have been told, don't go to bed angry, which most of us take to mean couples can't be angry or upset or frustrated for very long. Instead, they need to push and resolve issues fast. And the upset or bad emotions, they can't linger. It sounds good in theory, right? But in reality, resolving issues or the healthiness of a long-term relationship, problems don't work that way. In fact, for most couples that I work with, trying to solve issues fast, especially when you two are elevated, it makes things worse. Because when you're tired, your capacity, or what we call the window of tolerance, shrinks. And that makes you less patient and more likely to react from that threat response and less able to stay connected with your partner. So forcing your system when it's already depleted or highly activated, whether night or day, is not noble. It's actually reckless. Sometimes the most mature move for couples is learning how to pause and come back, not to avoid and not to shut down, but pause, take a break, take a beat. And I want to talk to you about how you can signal this to your partner. How can you signal we need a break and be able to share, I care about this, I'm not done, but I can't do this conversation well right now. Doing it in this kind of way, it's not disconnection. It's actually discipline. It's mature. It's healthy. And we all know that taking breaks are a healthy idea. Many of us have even heard the saying, cooler heads prevail. But if breaks work, why is it that we struggle to take breaks so often? And here's why taking breaks can be so difficult. Because in the heat of the moment, taking a break, taking a pause, and asking for it, it doesn't feel safe. For the more anxious partner, a break feels like abandonment, especially if they're used to their partner taking timeouts and not really asking for them, but just walking away. So the anxious partner generally learns they need to push, they need to demand talking more, and they need to demand the resolution because maybe the avoidant partner avoids or dismisses or shuts down, and then conversations don't really happen. On the other hand, for the avoidant partner, a break can feel like relief, but sometimes it's a little too relieving in the sense that they step away but they never come back. And this cycle, whether you're the one who shuts down and walks away without a healthy signal or you're the one who pushes, reinforces the anxiety and the frustration, so then both of you begin to react to each other even more strongly. But when couples learn to do breaks correctly, and the way that I want to talk to you about today, something shifts. The anxious partner learns, and in turn, the avoidant partner can also learn from breaks that I can stay and be present because I can take breaks when it's needed and my partner won't chase me or force me to stay in the conversation. So you two are learning and doing this work together. By learning how to take breaks and come back, you two are retraining each other's nervous systems to wire in a different way, to connect in a different way. Because a break, it works, but a break without structure, that won't work. So let's dive into the steps of how couples can take a break, how they can come back, and what ultimately this does for your relationship. Learning how to take a break is so important for couples. I've seen this time and time again, though, that most couples don't understand when a break is actually needed. They don't know how to spot the signs. So step one is learning what are the signs that we should even be taking a break. And the signs, the signals, they're quite subtle and they happen fast. And when they appear, most people think they're fine, they're still okay. But that line, that threshold is small. And once couples go over it, it's very hard to come back from it. And to help you learn how to spot the signs, I've got a worksheet for you. It doesn't require email or anything from you at all. You can click the first link in the description and grab that worksheet so that you and your partner can learn how to spot the signs. But even without that worksheet, let me just share with you very briefly what are some of the common signals, even though you are going to be different than everybody else, or you're going to have your own subtle, nuanced signals. But everybody, doesn't matter who they are, some of the signals that couples show are their heart rate increases, the tension in the body, that sense of focus changes, the tension in the face or the neck or the back changes, the heat in the body changes, the voice tone changes, the body posture will shift, maybe the glance will become more of a stare, or maybe the eye contact will go away. What are your signals? In the worksheet, I walk you through the steps so that you and your partner can do the worksheet and find for yourselves what are the warning signs that we're crossing over that threshold. Step two, decide together ahead of time how you're going to call a timeout. What is your cue to say, we need to pause? My recommendation is that you make it something very simple, just like in sports. Everybody knows what this means. Right here is timeout. Nobody accidentally does this. This is a very well thought out thing that in pretty much all sports, everybody knows it means timeout. I want you to have that same kind of signal in your relationship. And that phrase or that signal that you give each other, it means something very specific. And what it means and what it does for both of you is it pauses the conversation. It means we're escalated and we're protecting the relationship. When that pause gets called, there's no debate, there's no convincing, there's no explaining, there's no more conversation. This phrase and this signal, that's the shared agreement that we're going to stop. And then in 20, 30 to maybe an hour, we're going to come back and check in with each other again. For the signal to be effective, though, you need to have this conversation about the warning signs and what the signal is when you two are calm. Step three, When it comes to taking a break, I really want to encourage you to use we language. We need to take a break. We need to take a pause. Not you need to calm down. You're getting escalated. Instead, let's remove the you language and focus on either we or I. And the idea is we call the timeout to protect the relationship. I call the timeout even if my partner might be getting escalated. I call the timeout even if it seems like my partner is usually more the avoidant one, because when we call a timeout, we pause, we calm down, and then we come back together. Step 4, regulate during the timeout. Don't rehearse the issue. Don't litigate in your head what you're going to say or what was missed when you come back. And frankly, this is where most people mess up, because when they take a break, they keep arguing in their head. They keep litigating. They keep trying to refine their argument and building their case, replaying everything over and over. But truthfully, that's not a break. That's not you calming down. That's just the same fight occurring alone, occurring inside your head. A real break is about resetting your body. Maybe walking, maybe taking a deep breath, maybe splashing some cold water on your face or listening to some music. Something that calms your nervous system and lowers your heart rate. When you're taking a break, you're not trying to solve the problem. You're trying to reset your nervous system state so that when you come back, you two are calmer and more regulated. Step 5, agree that when we're escalated, we take a break, we calm down, but we also come back and we have a set amount of time that we take, whether it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes. We don't want a break to feel like more of the same thing where we're just creating some sort of agreement to pause and not return, or create more of a skill around abandonment. Instead, a break is also an agreement to have a return and not some sort of indefinite amount of time. Instead, 30, 60 minutes is a good starting point. And the idea about returning is not to come back and solve the problem, but instead to say to each other, I care about you. How are you? Can we check in about what happened? When we come back, we're not trying to solve everything. We just want to reconnect and signal to our partner, I love you, I care about you, I'm sorry about what happened, I'm still here. We still matter to each other. The issue, it matters to me, and I want us to continue to talk about it. And I want us to know that we can take breaks as often, as frequently as we need, and we will always return. That kind of repatterning where you two are taking breaks and coming back frequently, breaks and coming back, that changes the relationship. It changes how you two feel about one another and how you two feel about conflict itself. If you two are taking breaks and coming back within some sort of window, whether again it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, maybe even 2 hours, but you are coming back, it repatterns both of you to know that breaks are safe, returning is safe, because we can take breaks and we will return to it. This work, frankly, does require both of you. And at first, when I show couples this idea and I walk them through the steps of identifying the warning signs, learning how to take breaks, and learning how to return, they initially feel a little bit skeptical. And that's understandable. They feel, Luis, I'm not really sure you're giving us a solution to our problems, because you're either teaching us how to get better at avoiding or encouraging us to just talk more about the issues on repeat. And I'm not sure that's really going to work. Taking breaks and coming back, is that it? Learning how to spot the signs, calming down and coming back, is that it? That skepticism is natural and normal. But let me tell you about a couple that is like so many of the couples that I work with that initially kind of hesitated when I taught them the skill. And for weeks, we worked on this pattern, and that was it. When this couple came to me, they were one of the most volatile couples that I'd ever seen. They came in with the exact pattern that I'm talking about today, where they would escalate, they would go past that threshold, they would do it constantly and often, and things would get really bad. They would yell, they would argue, they would say they hated each other, they would threaten divorce, they would print up the divorce papers, and sometimes their fights got so bad that one of them would just leave the house without telling the other partner. They would just walk out of a conversation, or during the middle of the night after hours of talking, somebody would just say, you know, F it, I'm done, and walk out and drive across the state and go stay with family, or go get a hotel room and stay somewhere else. And sometimes that would happen and they would be apart from each other for days or even weeks. But even when they came back, there was always this tension, this anxiety, this felt sense like the next fight, it's around the corner. Sure, Time kind of let us simmer down, or time apart let things kind of calm down. But that tension, it never really went away. It just sat there, like static playing in the background, interrupting their sense of connection or intimacy, and the escalation that they had cut both ways. It made the bad moments worse, and it slowly eroded the good ones. So, in our work together, we made one thing the focus: learning how to take breaks and learning how to come back after the breaks. And something I said to them: when you do come back together, you can take breaks all over again. You can take as many breaks and have as many returns as possible. Anytime, as often as you need to, as long as you take a break and return. After a few weeks of talking and practicing just this skill, the couple came in, and the wife, the more anxious partner, said, "Luis, we've been taking breaks and I can see why they work, but when do we actually get to talk about things? Right now, what we're doing is we come in, we talk about something, and then within 5-10 minutes, we're taking another break. And then we take a break, and then we come back, and we never really actually dig in and solve the issues." Hearing the wife made me feel good inside, so I paused and I asked them something really important. "Are you two still yelling and screaming?" And both of them nodded no, not so much, not as bad as we used to. And if we do, we know that we should probably stop then. So I smiled, and then I asked another question. "How about, do things get so bad that you two leave for days or feel completely overwhelmed by your fights?" And they said, "No, not really." So I smiled and I said, "So what's different now? What's changed that some of these core issues that you two came in with, that they're no longer there and they're not as bad?" And they both kind of looked at each other, and then they said, "Well, we've learned to spot the signs and take a pause so our issues don't spiral." I smiled again and I said, "That's good. That's the work. That's the beginning, and that's the most important part. That is the foundation of a healthy relationship. And now, because you two have built the capacity to feel safe, to know that you can take breaks if you don't feel safe, to know that you should return to increase the safety, now you two can begin to have these longer conversations. But before, you two were trying to solve problems inside nervous systems that couldn't handle or had the capacity to talk to each other. Now, you two are creating a relationship that can manage escalation with care and attunement. And this is the shift. You don't resolve conflict by pushing through escalation. You resolve it by creating the conditions where resolution is actually possible. And that starts first with knowing, what are the warning signs that our relationship is going over that threshold? When should we stop, so that we don't damage the relationship in one moment, so that we don't have more damaging conversations? By pushing through when your body is telling you to stop, you continue to damage the relationship. And now it's time that you two learn how to protect it in a different way. Not with better words in the heat of the moment, but with enough discipline to pause and come back, so that next time that you feel that shift, that alarm going off, that tightening, that urgency, you and your partner don't override it. You call the break, you call the timeout, you protect the relationship. And then the healthy conversations will follow. Because what your relationship actually needs is healthy and safe conversations, not just more pushing through.